can see it's not ready. Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone. I wanted to share a little bit about digital storytelling through interviews. And so since you're all Wixie users, this is the perfect tool to be able to do this. Working, and you'll kind of see this as I go through, doing fictitious or real interviews is one of my favorite ways for kids to engage with content that they're reading, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or the topics that we're doing in the classroom, and provide so many creative opportunities for them to be able to sort of explore what they're doing in the classroom and sort of have a fun way to do that and build literacy and thinking at the same time. So the way I'm going to organize this for the next maybe 20 minutes is talk a little bit more about why interviews are powerful and why they're important in the classroom. I want to share about 4 to 5 different types of interviews that we can do, and then how we can support students through the process of designing their interview, and then obviously Wixie as the tool and some additional resources that we can do to make that. And I'll go in and share a little bit about how it's made. So as I said, interviews, and I think maybe the best way to talk about this is in today's age, kids need to, number one, create to learn. They don't just need to consume media, they need to create it. But even more than that, I think we need to give kids the skills to ask the right questions rather than just regurgitating an answer. Because now with the internet, they can look up an answer. Now, this is still about, they need to be able to find that, they need to be able to know that, they need to be able to do stuff with the information that they find. But crafting interviews gives them that opportunity to sort of say, okay, well, what questions should be asked about this topic, about this animal, about its adaptations, about this time in history? And it really puts kids in the driver's seat and sort of gives them a stepping stone to do that. Now, I think, Ms. Lynch, you work with pretty young students. So obviously we're going to scaffold some of that. And you'll see that in some of the different types of interviews that we do. And again, this is sort of, research has shown, when I talked about the kids making, is that when they're demonstrating their comprehension about, again, a topic and or literature, when they're making and analyzing and applying and writing the original stuff where they're not just copying and pasting facts. That's the wonderful part about an interview, is you sort of say, hello, Ms. Otter, can you tell me a little bit about where you live? Well, you can't copy and paste a fact from, Google Drive or, your Google document or a quick search that you did. It doesn't work that way. And even if you have to just reword that a little bit, I live in this, I eat it. It's again, it's those stepping stones into that, using that first person perspective to avoid a copy and paste where I don't have to do any of that thinking. And that's sort of, again, that questioning piece is, I think the biggest piece of all is learning how to ask the right questions as we go through this. So obviously, I think that when we think about interviews, the most common one we think about is interviewing real people. And I think this is definitely in the early grades, we could interview a family member. We're interviewing community heroes. That's what this example is here. This is a Wixie project that is about community heroes here. We'll get it started. We're not going to listen to this one, but this is the project was called Heroes Without Capes. Those of you who know Danielle, this is one that she did at one of her local schools. And Austin Wright is in the middle, and he kind of introduces himself here. He's a senior, and it talks about what he's won a couple community awards for cleaning up parks, helping seniors. But in particular, he sort of took over this particular park and leading how the community was going to keep it up, organizing volunteers, how, again, to something as simple as, distributing the trash. And he tells his story that way. So the student actually does real audio interviews with him and captures those pieces on each of the page, along with photographs they took at the time that they were visiting Austin as he was working in this particular, through this particular project. And I think the big piece here when we're interviewing other people, and again, we're asking them appropriate questions, we're building empathy. And so it's, again, sort of a social emotional kind of a thing where we're doing a whole lot of listening, and because that's another part about questioning, is the same way we're trying to figure out, how do I ask the right question to find information on here? How do I ask the right question in a way that's appropriate to someone to make them feel safe, honored, respected, and also engaged and willing to share? Because we know, I have a high schooler and a middle schooler at home, and how was your day? Fine. So, it's also, how do I ask questions? How do I talk to people? How do I show that I'm interested? in what they're doing. And then with interviews, it's such a fun way to also explore the idea of heroes. And that we can really expand a definition of heroes for our kids. Because that's, again, I love these 21st century, I want kids to build skills that are going to make them the citizens that we need when, in the future, to take care of the problems of this world. And that's going to be one. What does it mean to take a heroic action that's local? What does it look like when I'm only in 3rd grade to be a hero? And when kids are interviewing people and then sharing what they do. And I think that's one of my favorite pieces about using a tool like Wixie or digital tools in general is that it's so easy to share them. So I don't know if you're familiar, one of the newer features in Wixie over the holidays this year, the break, is that you can export your Wixie projects as video. And so it makes it very, very easy to share the work that students are doing. Show it on public access television. Again, if you're interviewing a person, there's got to be permissions and other things that we want to put in place before we simply share their face and their story. But that's sort of that empathy and that upfront contract as we're working with people and, again, honoring and telling their stories. And so I think that's sort of the biggest, most obvious one. But probably my favorite one to do is to get kids to develop interviews and sort of do the questioning piece in a place that's maybe a little safer the first time I learn how to do it. And that's by crafting a fictitious interview. And so in a science class, especially in K-4, maybe, where kids love animals in early elementary grades. And interviewing an animal to synthesize what I've learned through my research, how to organize information so that an interview makes sense as I go through, what information is has the highest priority there, and some creativity pieces in here. And I want to share this example of a dinosaur interview from Jacqueline. And I'm going to switch my mic off here so you can hear it and have her introduce it. And we'll look at a couple of pages so that you can see.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline, and I am interviewing a dinosaur. So, dinosaur, what is their name and what does it mean? My name is Colophysis, and it means hollow form. So, Colophysis, how big are you? I am exactly 50 pounds, 8 feet tall, and 10 feet long.
So you can sort of, what I love about this one is how much creativity comes through with this particular student, and especially the hand-drawn artwork. What I do love about this, if you see, if I just move pages, only a few things change. So she uses the same background and duplicates it and makes subtle changes. And I don't know if you can see the thing down the side on the right here is a ruler to show you how tall Colophysis is. And again, you mentioned you love her voice. And kids, this is what I love about this too, is they've grown up watching TV. They know what it's like to do an interview. They know what it's like to be interviewed. They know how to change their voice and adjust their, intonation to be that. And it just makes it so much fun. And they get sort of, again, in characterization of that. And in this case, do we really need to empathize with an animal? But we're still building empathy skills. How do I feel? One of the other examples that we often share with animals is there's an interview with Marvin the barred owl. And one of the questions the kids ask is, what do you look like? And do you like how you look? So it's sort of, again, those kids, starting to realize the world's going beyond just me and that other people are perceiving me with, and they're starting to experiment with this and think about those things. And, what does an animal have these sort of feelings? And even if they don't, it's that wonderful personification of that makes our nonfiction writing so much richer and more interesting. And again, it's that wonderful combination of narrative and informational writing. So interviewing animals. And similar lines, we can interview historic figures, or maybe even more fun is interview an artifact from history, like the hat that George Washington wore when he crossed the Delaware, or Paul Revere's horse. What would it be like to interview that particular character through history? I have an example of interviewing a historic bridge in Texas that kids did, and they put eyeballs on it and talk to it that way. But again, this sort of helps me, again, empathize with actions that figures took during history and try to better situate and give context to the events at the time and how they might have felt. This is a fun example. I don't know if we'll listen too much as it. I just want to simply show what it looks like. Is this one utilizes green screen. So the two students took pictures of themselves in Wixie behind a solid color. It doesn't have to be green, but green's a good color for that because it's usually opposite of skin tones. I have some fabric here in the office, and what we did is we took 5 people from our office with as far different skin tones as possible, and we went into a fabric store and took their hands against a digital, like a single color, and picked the color that showed the best for everybody's hands when we used the green screen to remove it. But you can use pretty much any color except white. And pink, again, so depending on your skin tone, dark colors and blacks are not good either, but a good color that way. So in Wixie, you add that image to the background, you glue it down, and you use the magic wand tool under the selection tool to get rid of the background, and then you can convert it into a sticker, which is you can sort of see the lines around each of these kids. So they're added as stickers in there. So they put a background on, put Chief Pontiac on, and then they take turns asking questions to this. And I don't know if we'll listen to this, but each one of these, the questions are pretty standard, but the response on the screen is a smaller portion of what the larger response is. So, there's more information that they're orally saying and speaking, but I don't want to read all of that on the screen. So it's also a wonderful sort of time to be able to let them write something longer that with an explanation, but also work on that summarizing, which we know from Marzano is another way to help them understand the content a little bit more deeply. So yeah, sorry, we'll go through a couple questions there, questions by the other student, and they get back together and they talk a little bit between themselves and go back through again. So fun ways, again, it could be a figure, an artifact, and helps them organize that or again, connect to that information. Another fun one to do is to simply connect to or interview a character from a book. So not asking about events in the story. This is not I suppose you could use it for retelling, but more of the, how did you feel? Why did you act that way? Because you acted this way before. Or you could ask a question, why did you act that way? And then your answer uses evidence from the text to explain that action based on, again, what you've done through your close reading. And again, you're really demonstrating comprehension here. This is an example from Percy Jackson. And so it's Annabeth interviewing Nico. And again, you can hear the students. I don't know. Oh, sorry. Hold on. You're not going to hear the thing a second. Let me refresh that a second while we go through. And I will change the audio here.
Nico, you are the son of Hades. Can I trust you as the son of death?
Annabeth, I know as the son of Hades I am scared. I was born before the pact, and I am not a bad person. I want to help.
Sorry. The difference between, say, Jacqueline doing the dinosaur interview, how much more dynamic her speaking was that way. These two, again, this is a middle school, and that's actually something you'll see if you work with multiple grade levels, that fluency, intonation, and expression in middle school actually drops, unless you have a kid who loves drama and loves the spotlight, because they're much more concerned about how other people perceive them, and that, they can't seem too into the story. They're so hesitant, and they've lost a little bit of that confidence that they might have in early elementary. But it's sort of again, so in Wixie, when you're recording, you can see I have the sound button here. So you can record a single audio file. So kids just sit together and both talk in the microphone at the same time. So we're not adding multiple sounds for that. Oops, sorry, there you go. So those are kind of the big types: interviewing animals, real people, community heroes, historic figures or artifacts, and characters from books that we're reading. So the fictional piece of that to demonstrate comprehension. And when kids are doing this in the classroom, we need to start off by, number one, telling them you're going to do an interview. Depending on the age of your students, we're going to ask them these questions. Or again, if I want, because I want to do a gradual release of responsibility, or certainly release responsibility as kids get older. So, I might start in the early primary grades, here's the questions, and then in elementary, like the animal interview, especially the owl one, you have to talk about the physical characteristics of the animal and their adaptations, and then something about where they live. Other teachers might get more expansive, doing that. And then you have to talk about predators. You have to talk about the food they eat, etc. But they're not telling them what the question is. So the topic on each of these pages that you should cover should be this, and you're going to uncover it by asking these different questions. So again, we're trying to put kids in the driver's seat. So in putting them together in groups to be able to do this, for interviews, because there's a lot of back and forth, it's a lot for one kid to finish by themselves. So just know, if you're going to assign it as an individual sort of performance assessment, that you need to give them a whole lot more time to be able to come up with this. Groups have their own time. Time is just different, needs to be differently managed with that. But multiple students can do a little bit more of the legwork with the research, or if you're doing, like, say, interviewing a book character, they have more opinions because they both read the book and they have that knowledge already. So it's thinking strategically about how I want to pair students up. Because interviews are usually one-on-one, is having 2 kids in a team works really well. But the students who interviewed Chief Pontiac did just 2 interviewers and 1 interviewee, and then you could put 3 people on that, so that there's a speaking part for each student. Because although again, if you have emerging readers or kids who aren't willing to speak in class, then maybe just one person interviewing, and they can be the silent person in the back, running the computer, doing the microphone, again, supporting the research, clarifying, and those kind of sort of non-speaking parts might be another option there. Then getting kids to ask questions and brainstorming ideas. Again, that's sort of where we can, as teachers, do that gradual release of responsibility. So what questions should we be asking of these people? If they're each interviewing characters from different books, what are common things we need to know about characters? Or should we be picking individual events that are unique to the book? Can you do an interview in a way that's sort of a promotional material for a book? Why are you the best character in this book? If we want to do a sort of analysis, so some fun ways to do that. But getting the kids on board so that they have some choice and can be able to do that, and can sort of feel like they're enabled to drive the project. Giving them time to build knowledge and develop focus. This, I think, is the key place where, as far as time is concerned, doing a big interview project like this is not the time to get kids to figure out how to find quality information in books and online. They should hopefully know how to do that already, or I will have done the work for them. The thinking's pretty heavy in this one because we're learning how to question, we're learning how to apply that information. So the content, while the content can still be heavy or a lot or considerable, I can't make getting the content hard also. Otherwise, it's a sort of out of balance for that. So that's the third spot is a really great place to sort of, again, go back into teacher mode and say, okay, if you guys are studying George Washington, then you should be reading these books because I know they're at your reading level, and this will give you enough information to be able to share a little bit more about the events that you should be talking about in this interview, or that as you tell me what you should be talking about. Getting kids to actually plan or storyboard. Do I have a photo of that here? Sort of a storyboard on the far right here. As a way to get them to plan it out ahead of time. What questions are you going to ask each time? And sometimes it could be, with a dinosaur interview, it could be a stick figures. The first scene I'm going to introduce, I'm interviewing the Colossus. The second one is, what does the name mean? I could just put the word name in there. The third one is how big or size. So again, it doesn't have to be super complex. This one's pretty deep as far as telling the story that way. And then it's actually working on, I like the plan ahead of time because that makes the digital work a whole lot easier. And again, for me as a teacher, if I'm facilitating all of these kids doing different projects, if they have a storyboard, I at least know where they're trying to go. And then a lot of times I'll even say, okay, you can't get on the computer and start building your interview until you show me your finished storyboard, so that I know that you have a plan, and we're not going to spend 2.5 days on the title screen and not because we don't even have our questions done. So again, it's sort of even at that stage too, I would want to have those questions done first so they can develop what the answers are and or develop the questions and the answers as they do that research. So combining it all, and then finally really getting an opportunity to show off what they've done. And share it. If it's at, again, it's a little hard. You can't have parents come in or have a big event necessarily at school, but it's easy now. We're all getting used to watching things on Zoom. And even the parents, not most, but a lot of parents are now on Zoom on a regular basis. So they are familiar with watching something on Zoom and knowing how to interact and turn mics off and, share things in chat and show, the hype and the celebration that way. So really getting kids to do more that way with that showcase and that publishing piece. Wixie also has things you can do to support that process. And I already mentioned the storyboard, but I might do a character trait cluster. I could even do that for an animal. What does an emperor penguin look like? Well, it's tall. The dads take care of the babies. What are some of the key features that I want to show for that? And it doesn't have to be complex. This one is a little bit more where it has the character traits, but then it also has evidence from the text to be able to share that, which again is so all of a sudden now I could start to say, okay, Susanna, during Shelter Pet Squad, you take care of a lot of animals. What skill do you think makes you the best at taking, what makes you a great animal caregiver? And, sharing one of those things and giving the example for that. And, are there any other things you would suggest for other people to do? And again, it depends on what I want kids to draw out of the book. And that's, again, going to be something I'm going to choose probably by having them not just do interviews with characters from any book, but from a series of books or a collection of books that we're all reading on a similar topic. Empathy maps are another one. This is a simple one for a chinchilla. What do I see? What do I hear? What do I think? How do I feel? And even if I don't, I'm not necessarily going to ask those things in an interview. What do you see when you, but I could, what do you see when you come out of your burrow? That's a fun way to sort of talk about a habitat. And it helps me get into the mind of I see, I do. But it could sort of, also be, well, where do you live? Well, I live on these open plains, but I need a place to hide. And so then again, all those things lead into providing kids some of that text that they can draw from when they're doing their writing. This is, think about doing interviews in the classroom. We're really not going to do this in the space of 1 or 2 days. This is something that they're working on over the course of, a week or 2, maybe even 3 weeks, depending on how elaborate you're getting and how much you're scaffolding. So if you need to save time, you put more of the, you provide the resources, you provide the questions, et cetera, and give more structure. But again, the more we pull back, the more that the students are learning on that inquiry, the research process on their own, writing on their own, et cetera, and sort of going through that. And I think that's the best part I love about Wixie is Wixie makes it so easy to do these kinds of things. If we go into here, I'm just going to quick log in here a minute. I should have been logged in already, but we'll do it quick. It's going to log in my teacher account and we'll make something there. Home and go to new. So again, I can work with adding images. And I could, again, look for, if we're going to, interview Abraham Lincoln, President's Day is coming up. Oh, this is a much more funny sort of character to look at. Oops, there we go. Oops, I can't touch. There we go. My sizing's off. There we go. Put him in. I might want to put him in front of, the White House so I could look through backgrounds. I think locations. Do we have the White House in here? There we go. Put that in there. I could put myself in a chair, in the background. I could capture my image this way, using the camera and add that in. So I'm looking sideways, but that's probably fine too. And then, sorry, there we go. Change that. And then I could go ahead and do that. We'll flip it sideways so it looks like I'm talking to him. And again, put that over here and do that change there. You could see in some of those, if we're going to make this visually interesting, I added a text box and I can add sort of that speech bubble to be able to make it a little bit more obvious. And that's, again, for those, some people like to read. And that's one of the things they're showing with I don't know if you like TikTok videos and Instagram videos and other things, you're starting to see a lot more of the subtitles because they're finding that people really like to see the words at the same time that they're listening to someone. And this is, again, an opportunity to maybe share the question, type that, make it clear for my viewer, but also encourage in the response piece of that, I'm just going to copy this over here, is maybe my audio has a whole lot more information in answer to my question, but I'm summarizing the key ideas in the speech bubble itself. We could also, again, add ourselves as video. So I could put a video piece of that onto this as well. And I would simply, again, record my voice and say those kinds of things, stop, and then add it. And it will add a video in here so I could videotape myself asking the question as well. So, you know, some option, there's a lot, I mean, there's so many options that way. And then for every single page in my project, I simply want to add another one. And again, go in the background and find another landscape. You know, maybe about growing up in the woods in Illinois, for if I'm doing Lincoln, I can share those kinds of things. And then you can see my storyboard goes through at the top in that storyboard view. So a pretty easy way, I just add pages for that. And then when I'm going to, video has the voice already embedded, but if I didn't want to do a video and I wanted to record my voice, there's the microphone tool. It taps right in and I simply record and or talk to my friend. I have that countdown. Hey, Lincoln, I heard you had a rough and rocky road to get to the White House. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey to become president? And again, I could keep that in here, and that's my piece, and then it shows up as that icon that someone can select when they're watching it. If you export then as a video, you can go to download there, and there's a Wixie option, I'm sorry, a video option there, and it just plays that video automatically, plays the audio automatically and captures that, and then moves to the next page. And so there's automatically sort of a transition between, and it goes to the next page and plays the audio as long as it needs to be there. If you go to that storyboard feature, I could also see, you see it's going to auto advance, it's got a fade on between. I could choose background music. I don't know what, none of these are probably that appropriate here. So we'll just do some full or gentle guitar. We'll put that in the background, and I could, you know, turn the volume down a little bit so it's not overshadowing my interview. But if I wanted, you know, fancy something, I could add those kinds of things to it as well. But that's a nice, easy way to be able to share it that way. And again, I could share it with parents by grabbing that link at the top. And if your kids are doing this, it's likely to be behind a passkey. And so going to, if you're in the file or sharing that way, or as a teacher, when you go to that share option, the URL will have an additional bit of information here so that it sends or send an email to parents this way. So it says you need to plug in this passcode in order to be able to view this. So it's not necessarily just public. That way. But exporting as a video and uploading to a site, if your site has one, is another way to be able to do that. So that was the quick and fast kind of thoughts about digital storytelling, but I hope you really see, it's just such a fun way to engage in content and sort of a creative approach that goes way beyond 5 facts. And, you know, so, but you know, 3 facts about an animal, that's a great way to start. Make a poster that shares that or this or that, but going beyond that as kids grow and over the course of the year, I'm making them do more and more writing, more and more thinking, more and more questioning, more and more work on their own on that blank page to be able to choose how they want to do that. And again, even thinking about backgrounds, what would this person have been? What's the habitat for this particular animal? All those biomes, the kinds of things, and in a lot of different locations are already inside of Wixie in the backgrounds or in the clip art there to be able to do that. And I know there's a lot of people ask for a specific clip art, which makes it super fast. I love that because it does sort of take some of the time away from doing this. But of all of the interviews that I get from kids, the ones that have their original artwork, like the Colophysis from Jacqueline, they're so much more delightful. And especially when they add that student voice, when they get into character like that, they're just hysterical. And sometimes you hear sound effects. And I don't know if you could hear in the 3rd page of Jacqueline, there was a lot of like moving the mouse around and before she started talking. And you know, that's just such a wonderful part of doing this and being able to get a window into them. You're sort of seeing the learning in action, or you're hearing the learning in action as they learn how to be media producers and media communicators, or other noise going around in the back of the classroom, which again, maybe might make things a little less perfect, but also makes them a whole lot more real and original, and really fun reflections of what learning can be like in an engaging classroom. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments? Feel free to jump in off the mic or. Oh, good question. Wixie does not have captioning. So although it's sort of interesting, and I love this about the way technology works, in that Wixie now has text to speech. If I switch over here, switch over here to one of these. Well, let me actually type something so that that's not really going to help, is it? Hold on. If I type something here, you can see that I have a yellow yellow speech bubble on that. So that is now due to the fact that the text-to-speech technology is built into your browser, and it's just easier to access and have across a whole lot of platforms. Captioning is starting to, you can auto caption things in YouTube now. TikTok is getting closer to that too. So I think, it isn't going to be there in 6 months, but it's not 20 years away for us to have this sort of automatic, sort of adaptive technology pieces built into tools like this. I think, again, I don't know where that is in any sort of development, but that's been sort of the fun thing watching Wixie, because Wixie is actually 10 years old now. And watching its development over time is, we could install something to do text to speech years ago, but then it would work on Macs, but not on PCs, or you could, it just too many things, but it's now sort of everywhere as technology just gets better and better. And I think the common language of HTML5 is really helping make a lot more pieces accessible. Sorry, that was a big answer.
No, I love it too, because I think it also is integrating so many different curriculum areas. You've got your writing in there, you've got organization in there, you've got art in there, you've got production in there. There's so many different facets of it that you could pull in. And, there was some questions about grading, and I think you could even pull pieces about, you could get a writing grade, because if you have to write in your storyboard first, like a lot of times when we've done this, I always say to the kids, the important piece is what you're building. The end product is like a celebration. And so you can have those grades on the celebration piece too, but you can't do that part until we've got this pretty solid, or we can build on this part, and you can have those grades kind of going along the way that kind of build up. And it also shows them how that end result is the process of that planning.
Okay. I think my question was, like, how do you break it down if it's like a team effort? There's always going to be the predominant person, the leader or whatever. And then you get the shy mouse, and, you want to give them a grade, but, they didn't get a talking piece, or they didn't, they feel like they didn't get to contribute. So, I want equity across the board. I don't know. I'm kindergarten, so I was just thinking.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's harder too, because they're not ready to write so much. So, asking them to each have their own research piece, and it just starts to be a little bit too much. And so, but the one thing, and this might be, working more at a center or a station rotation time, so that you can check in to see, and you can listen and draw out those kids and sort of redistribute the work a little bit, or try to make some of those pieces a little bit more equitable. But I do think too is drawing, maybe it's even doing a character trait cluster, or, that sort of cluster diagram where everybody has one of those. And even if they do all of the research as a team, every kid's writing that down, so that I can sort of identify and say, okay, there's a check that I can say, okay, there's a good check for understanding right there, that I got that. So another.
And then another thing we've done in groups too is we actually, as a group, we identify the roles that are needed. So I'm going to need somebody to interview. I'm going to need somebody to create a background. I'm going to need somebody to be the tech person. And we kind of talk about what is the important piece of each job. And then we have the kids say, oh, I want, they kind of work as a group and kind of choose, I say, pick, your top 2 jobs that you would like to have. And I think when kids take ownership and they can choose something that they want to do in a project, they're a little bit more apt to be more involved, because like, oh, that's my job. That's what I need to do to make this work. Because it's, depending on how you lay it out, if you do it as a group, really stressing that piece that if this is a group thing, we need you all. We need this person to do their part. We need this person to do their part so that the end result comes together.
So those expectations are set right at the get-go, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I agree that this is a really good example of why you need a team to be able to accomplish some of these bigger things. Absolutely.
Talk about collaboration, right? I mean,
That's right. That's right. That's right. This is exactly, and really understanding why. So I think that's a great option.